Shalom. I'd like to start out by giving all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Kakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the great millstone, and Shalom to the elect of Israel. This is the Mayim in Atlanta, and we're going to start out right here at Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 9. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. And that's a reincarnation script right there. But reincarnation isn't just the reincarnation of souls and spirits. It also goes into cities and things that have been in the past. And so I brought that up because we're going to speak on Egypt and how the U.S. of A., United States of America, is also seen as a spiritual Egypt within the scriptures. And so this is Deuteronomy 28 and verse 68. And the Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Speaking of the Israelites, these are the curses that were put onto the Israelites. The Israelites in today's time being the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as the scattered, because we were scattered to the four corners of the earth. So we're going to come back looking like all the other nations, but primarily we would be seen as Negroes and Latinos and Native Americans. And this is speaking of the bondage that we went into, the slavery, the captivity we were in, and still are in here in America. And this started with the Northern Kingdom, the Latinos and Native Americans, because even in school you learn that they were used first as slaves when America was being built up, and then the Southern Kingdom came, so-called Negroes, and that's not into ancient Egypt, but it's into this reincarnated spiritual Egypt, which is America. That's where we went into captivity again with ships. And that's a huge part of it as well, with ships, because it wasn't train cars as these small hatters try to say that, because the small hatters try to say that the train cars during World War II that moved them to and from the those camps that they were in, they try to say that that's a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28 and 68, but it says with ships into this spiritual Egypt. And so we're going to go to Exodus 20, because it shows that Egypt is likened unto the house of bondage. This is Exodus 20 and verse 2. I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So showing that Egypt is synonymous with captivity and with bondage. So reading this again in Deuteronomy 28 and 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again, so into captivity again, or into the house of bondage again, with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. That buy you goes into redeem you, going into the kinsman redeemer, which our kinsman redeemer is Yahweh Shai. But this happened to us, and only us. These little periods for that the other people try to say That is not a fulfillment of this. This happened to the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You can think of, for the Northern Kingdom, being on ships, because there's not too many records of that. You could think of Squanto, because Squanto spoke English, and it was a result of him being shipped over to England, and somehow he found his way back. But he, even in the, I think it's the Thanksgiving story, he was able to help because he knew English. So that's an example of the Northern Kingdom going into bondage on ships, into captivity on ships. And so we would go into this captivity, into this house of bondage in this spiritual Egypt, and there our remembrance of who we are would have been beat out of us. And this happened through the hardcore slavery that we're in, and the families being split up, so information not transferring from the older to younger, and eventually we forgot completely that we were Israelites. But in this same place where this was taken away, as it says, in the land of your captivities ye shall remember yourselves, this also happens within this spiritual Egypt. And it's explained here in Revelation 11, because you have your two witnesses, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, standing up in the latter times, in the end days, and staking a claim as the Israelites. And this would all go into the controversy of Zion, because there's been another people that have been claiming to be the Lord's people, but they're not, because that never happened to them. And they've claimed to have been the people for the last 3,000 plus years, but that doesn't fit prophecy, because the Israelites would lose their heritage, lose knowledge of who they are. But they would begin to stand up in the latter times. And this goes into that. Revelation 11 and verse 8. In their dead bodies, this is going into the Israelites, in a state of not remembering who they are, not having a heritage, not having any information on where their ancestry comes from. And it says, in their dead bodies, because that's a dead state, to not know who you are, shall lie in the street of the great city, that great city being America, which goes by many names within the scriptures. It says, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. And so this isn't actually ancient Sodom, but a lot of the practices that are practiced here show that it is of Sodom, specifically the alphabet agenda and what's going on. And it says, and Egypt. So this place is spiritually called Egypt because of the bondage, because of the slavery and the captivity that we're in, where also our Lord was crucified, and everything the Lord stood for was canceled out here. Instead of him being a dark-skinned man, they made him into a light-skinned man, or into a pale man, into a so-called white man. And instead of him being an austere man, they've changed him into God loves everybody, everybody could be saved, this all-loving guy. But that's no balance whatsoever. And Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai are powers of balance. They love and hate. But this all happened and took place here within America. And so I want to show some other signs that this is America. Saw this on a brother's page. Forget the brother, Salakia, but this is showing some of the cities here within America that are named after Egyptian cities. It says there are several cities and towns in the United States named after Egypt or Egyptian cities. Some notable examples include Cairo, Illinois, perhaps the most famous U.S. city named after an Egyptian city located at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, kind of similar to even how the Nile went through Egypt. We have Memphis, Tennessee, which is named after the ancient city of Egypt. Memphis was a major city of the Old Kingdom. That's also on right off the Mississippi or the Nile, but it's the Mississippi. But Thebes, Illinois, a small town named after the famous Egyptian city of Thebes, modern Luxor. Heliopolis, Maryland, says it's named after the sun god Ra. You have Goshen, mentioned in the scriptures. Luxor, Pennsylvania, and then Alexandria, which you have in many states. And so there's one connection. You also have what's on the dollar bill, that big pyramid that's there on the dollar bill, and then various monuments like the Lincoln, I think it's the Lincoln Monument, where it's that big, tall obelisk that's here, which Egypt was known for that. And then you have various pyramids, monuments, and things around the U.S. And then you also have the red, white, and blue, which you can see it here. We don't have to go into it too much, but red, white, and blue was a prominent color in ancient Egypt. And here in this modern Egypt, or spiritual Egypt, it's the national colors of the United States, and you see it right down there at the United States flag. But our dead bodies will lie in the streets of this great place, that being both the northern and the southern kingdom. And here we'll keep reading down. It says in verse 9, Revelation 11 and 9, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see the dead bodies 3 days and a half. And so here in Babylon the Great, aka America, aka spiritual Egypt, this place is known as a melting pot, and you have all sorts of different people, and it hints at it here. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations. And you have all of the different peoples and kindreds and tongues and nations here within the United States. Another reference for this being a spiritual place that it's speaking of, and being America that it's speaking of. Shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, because the Israelites were in a dead state, not knowing who we were, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves, because they did not tell us who we were, that we are, in fact, the Israelites. And it says 3 days and a half, that's signifying 350 years from that point in 1619, where they say the first slave ships came with the Southern Kingdom in it, all the way up to 1969, when Abba Bivens started using the whole Bible and trying to wake up his people, which he would represent Elijah, or he is Elijah, that same spirit reincarnated. We just read, I think it was Ecclesiastes 1 and 9 with that reincarnation. Verse 10, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another. We were traded back and forth, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth, both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And this is what made America rich, the slave trade. And after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, and they stood upon their feet. So 1969, and we're still waking up and still standing on our feet. And great fear fell upon them which saw them. So this is happening primarily here within Babylon the Great, within America, within spiritual Egypt. And the scripts speak of how the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were in, actually, let's get that real quick. I think it's Judah, Israel together. I think it's Jeremiah 50. Yeah. Jeremiah 50 and 33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. Also showing, because we have both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom here, in captivity, in bondage, in the house of bondage in Egypt. But we're at the end of it. We're at the end of this. But these are all showing that this is Egypt, or that America is called Egypt. Verse 34, the Redeemer is strong. The Lord of hosts is his name. He shall thoroughly plead their cause, that he may give rest to the land and disquiet the inhabitants of Babylon. This place goes by many names. It has different names from Babylon, like Nineveh, and so on and so forth. It's also described as Assyria. It's called Sodom, as we just saw in Revelation 11. And it's called Egypt as well. But the Lord is not going to leave us here in Egypt. He's going to bring us out with a mighty hand. This is 2 Esdras 15 and verse 10. Behold, my people is led as a flock to the slaughter. I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt. It's not speaking of ancient Egypt. When this was written, this was hundreds of years past the Exodus. This is speaking of this modern spiritual Egypt, which is America, where his people are, both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and where bondage and captivity were served. Verse 11, but I will bring them with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, and smite Egypt with plagues. As the Lord smote Egypt with plagues back in ancient Egypt during the time of Exodus, but he's going to do it again in this modern Egypt. He says, as before. So it's showing it's not ancient Egypt he's speaking of. It's this modern place, this spiritual Egypt, and will destroy all the land thereof. And the prophecies of Babylon speak of it being completely destroyed, no one dwelling here again, which are the ICBMs, which are going to hit this place, which also show ancient Egypt was not destroyed in that same manner. People still dwell in Egypt, and Egypt was still a major place throughout history. It says, Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and punishment that the Most High shall bring upon it. And we're already seeing some of the mourning, because the Lord is starting to strike this place. There's all sorts of weird things happening that are bringing this place down. You can see the wars coming up. You can see the famine peering its head out. And you see the economy failing. And these people are already mourning. And the Lord hasn't even really unleashed the plagues of Egypt onto this place yet. But he's going to, and he's going to bring this place down, and he's going to lead his elect of the northern and southern kingdom of Israel out of Egypt again. He's going to lead us out of Egypt again, strike this place down and punish it for what they've done. And so, Lord willing, that was edifying. America is the spiritual Egypt, and Lord willing, you could see that. I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Ukakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone, and Shalom to the elect of Israel. Shalom.